lahashta bagala ubizman kariv hamakom yirachem aleihem yotziem mitzara lirvacha umeafel aleora umishiyabun ligeula hashta bagala ubizman kariv.
Thank you very much. When on June 12th, Naftali, Gilad, and Eyal were kidnapped, the entire Jewish world mobilized as one, just as we were when we stood at the foot of Sinai. As our sages tell us, when we came to receive the Torah, we stood ki'ish echad, belev echad, as one person, with one heart, united as a worldwide community in this case, secular to Haredi, Rabin Square to Lakewood, all mourned, all said Tehillim. We stood as one in hope, we stood as one in prayer, and we stood as one in action too, doing everything possible to rescue these three innocent victims who quickly became known as our boys. Last Tuesday, when their bodies were found, our deepest collective hopes turned to collective mourning. In the wake of this tragedy, I think all of us sense the emergence of a sense of unity, a welcome sense of unity, a sense of common concern and purpose among Jews worldwide, a feeling that we have all too rarely experienced in our recent history. As a people, for once, we disregarded our differences and focused on the common factors that unite us. We hoped and prayed as one that these three young yeshiva boys would be saved, and now we mourn as one for their loss. If one can be permitted to speak of a redeeming factor in this immense tragedy, it is the sense of Jewish unity that these three boys and their brave and dignified families inspired in all of us. It is in that spirit of unity that we are honored to be joined tonight by three leading rabbis in our community from the Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox movements to share their thoughts with us in these difficult times. I would ask Rabbi Eyal Splansky, Senior Rabbi of Holy Blossom Temple, Rabbi Baruch Friedman Cole, Senior Rabbi of Beth Tzedek Congregation, and Rabbi Daniel Koropkin, Senior Rabbi of Beth Avram Yosef of Toronto Congregation, to share their thoughts with us.
A poem by Roni Somek, translated from the Hebrew by Vivian Eden. The title is Dream Treaties. There were half-green lawns, miserly sprinklers, and one scary moment when my daughter vanished from view. She was 3 at the time, and after a search of several minutes, we found her grinning from ear to ear, standing in a wagon usually used for distributing towels. And the children of Samech al-Qasim and Mohammed Hamza Genayem had trundled her from one end of the hall to the other. More than a field of thorns could have been planted there in the furrows plowed by the adults' brows. Afterward, the children changed roles, and the cart continued to sail like a pleasure ship in the puddles of words choked in 2 languages. I so wanted to be a captain, or a deck boy, or even just a life buoy on that voyage. And I was madly envious of the children who, had they paper and pencil, would, in the space of 10 minutes, have signed dream treaties. We have come tonight first and foremost to mourn for Eyal, Gilad, and Naftali. And I believe that we might have also come tonight to mourn something larger. We sense a larger loss looming, the loss of our hope for the Israel of our dreams. Herzl famously said, Im tirtzu ein zo agada, if you will it, it is no dream. And the giants who followed him fulfilled the dream of establishing a sovereign Jewish state in our land, in the land of Israel. And the generations that followed built up the land beyond even our most wild dreams. And yet the dream of Israel at peace eludes us. That dream of Israel all aglow with peace is slowly but surely being replaced by either violence or at best cynicism. Tonight, now into the month of Tammuz, we mourn for Yerushalayim, which is to be an Ir Shalom, a city all aglow with peace. We must not let the murderers of the three, nor the murderers of the one, to rob us of that hope. For we are only as worthy as our hopes. We are only as good and as noble as our dreams. How do we find our way back to it? How do we keep the glorious words of Hatikva from becoming a fantasy, or worse, a satire? Od lo avda tikvatenu, our hope is not lost. Hatikva bat shnot alpayim, the hope of 2 millennia, lihiyot am chofshi ba'artzenu, to be a free people in our land, free from fear, free from hatred, free from cynicism. We seem so far from that dream today. But the first stanza of Hatikva offers an instruction which can help us make our way back to it, to cling to it with everything we have. That first stanza describes the challenge, Kol od balevav penima, so long as still within the innermost heart, Nefesh Yehudi homia, a Jewish spirit sings. Ulfate Mizrach Kadima Ayin Letzion Sophia, and so long as the eye looks eastward toward Jerusalem. So we ask, are our eyes locked on Jerusalem? Do our souls ring and sing with Jewish learning and Jewish living? Is our innermost heart the home of a Jewish spirit, or is our innermost heart too easily distracted? Tonight we can look at these three boys and hold them up like a mirror. They were students of Torah. They were would-be soldiers of Israel. Even at such a young age, they knew who they were. They knew where they came from. They knew to whom they belonged. Can we say the same about our own teenagers, our own children and grandchildren? Can we say the same about ourselves? Do we share their clarity of purpose in the unfolding of Jewish history? Do we share their pursuit of the Jewish destiny? Tonight we mourn them and we grieve with their families. But tomorrow, let us get to work. Let us create unity between Jew and Jew in Israel. Let us create unity between Jew and Jew right here in Toronto, as we do tonight in this sacred place. Let us meet face to face with lovers of peace everywhere and listen, really listen to one another. And most of all, let us inspire that Nefesh Yehudi in the coming generation, for without it we are lost. Without it our hopes are dashed and our dreams are deemed irrelevant. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu va'al kol Yisrael va'al kol yoshveha. May the one who brings peace to the heights of heaven bring peace to descend on us, upon all Israel and all her inhabitants. Amen.
Bereshut ha'arav v'hakahal. I ask you for a moment to remember where you were when you heard that the 3 boys were kidnapped. And I ask you to recall for a moment what you were doing when you heard the news that they were dead. Bila hamavet lanetzach. May God destroy death forever, and may the eternal God wipe away tears from every face. Just 19 days ago, we gathered in hope. Tonight we assemble in sadness to remember Eyal ben Iris ve'Uri, Gilad ben Bat Galim ve'Ophir, and Naftali ben Avraham ve'Rachel. We are in the West, but our hearts and our tears are in the East, with the grieving Yifrach, Sha'ar, and Frankel families. Itchem anachnu b'tzaratchem. Years ago, in response to the murder of Jews by Nazis, Rabbi Yitzchak Nissenbaum said that the imperative of the hour was not the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, martyrdom, but a new obligation, Kiddush HaChaim. Nissenbaum wrote, "In the past, our enemies demanded our soul, and the Jew sacrificed his body in sanctifying God's name. Now, the enemy demands the body of the Jew. That makes it imperative for the Jew to defend it and protect it. Jews have a right to live in security and safety." Naftali, Eyal, and Gilad were killed by people who believed in death. Along with the imperative to live and to continue Jewish life, we must extend Kiddush HaChaim to teach respect and sanctification for life. We must not allow ourselves to be swallowed by a culture of death and destruction. On this day, the anniversary of the rescue from Entebbe, we must remind ourselves and the world that these murders in Israel were not the first. We have been witness to hijacks and hostage takings, drive-by shootings, and the slaughter of children in their beds. We have seen the bombings of buses, nightclubs, hotels, restaurants, kindergartens, and senior centers, as well as the blood-stained hands celebrating the lynching of Jews. We have every right to anger and rage, but we must not succumb to those feelings. When Cain was frustrated and angry over the rejection of his offering, the Torah tells us of God's question, "Why are you angry? Its desire is for you, but you must master it." Our tradition teaches us to control those natural human reactions. 51 years ago, in September 1963, speaking at the funeral service of 4 teenage girls, they were 14 years old, in the bombing of a Birmingham, Alabama church, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King reminded those in attendance, "These children, unoffending, innocent, and beautiful, were the victims of a vicious and tragic crime. They say to each of us that we must substitute courage for caution, that we must be concerned not merely about those who murdered them, but about the system, the way of life, the philosophy which produced the murderers." He continued, "God still has a way of wringing good out of evil. The innocent blood of these little girls may well serve as a redemptive force. I say to all who are assembled here that in spite of the darkness of this hour, we must not despair. We must not become bitter, nor must we harbor the desire to retaliate with violence. Somehow, we must believe that the most misguided among those who hate can learn to respect the dignity and worth of all human personality." Ancient architecture placed the most important element of a city in the center, protected by surrounding structures. And in the center of the Torah is the mitzvah, lo tikom velo titor. Do not take revenge. Notwithstanding our feelings of righteous anger, we are not permitted to kill or murder. We did not return to Eretz Yisrael to be injured or to be killed, nor did we return to injure or to kill. We returned to our indigenous land, our indigenous language, and our indigenous culture to build a future, to build a life for a people yearning for rebirth, revival, and renewal. A living people for a living land. The horrific murder of these 3 Jewish teenagers inflamed deep-seated rage. But after the arrest of suspects in the burning to death of a Palestinian teenager, it is impossible to ignore the incitement to vengeance that has been voiced. The murder of Muhammad Abu Khadir has ignited anger throughout the Arab community. Prime Minister Netanyahu said, "In the society of Israel, there is no place for such murderers. We condemn them and we put them on trial and we will put them in prison. We do not seek the destruction of the Palestinian people. All calls for destruction and death must end. There is too much suffering. There is too much pain." It was Rachel Frankel, the mother of Naftali, of blessed memory, who spoke this deep truth out of deep anguish. Yiyu ha'le'um v'hagil asher yiyu. Retzach hu retzach, ein hevdel ben dam ledam. There is no difference between blood and blood. Murder is murder, whatever the nationality or the age. May the memories of Eyal ben Iris v'Uri, Gilad ben Galim v'Ofer, and Naftali ben Avraham v'Rachel teach us all the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChaim. We sanctify the God of life by continuing Jewish life and by respecting all life.
This past Monday, as the news came in, so many memories kept rushing into my mind. Some of the similar tragedies that our people have experienced over the last dozen years or so due to acts of terror in Israel. And so I began to recall the Sbarro bombing of August 9th, 2001, when 15 innocent people were killed, including a young lady from Los Angeles, a newlywed, Shoshana Heyman, herself an only child who was pregnant with her first child. I recalled Nava Applebaum, who was murdered on September 9th, 2003, the night before her wedding, and how a parochet, an ark cover at Kever Rachel, the grave of Rachel, now stands, made from her wedding dress. I also noted that our own community at the Bayit had been racked with the pain and horror of losing one of our own, Chezi Goldberg, who was murdered in a bus explosion in Israel on January 29th, 2004. And yet he was but one of many Canadians whose lives have been lost to terror. I recalled the Merkaz Harav massacre of March 6th, 2008, when 8 high school boys were murdered in their Beit Midrash and their yeshiva. And the images of blood-stained Sfarim are still indelible in our minds. And I recalled the savage massacre of the Fogel family in Itamar on March 11th, 2011, just a few months before my wife and I came to Toronto, where 5 members of the Fogel family were butchered in their beds, including a small infant. And I recalled those episodes not to trivialize the current tragedy, but just the opposite, to remind us that we must not and cannot ever forget. The fact is, we're all human beings, and the human condition demands of us to move forward with life, and so we have this uncanny ability to compartmentalize tragedy. And we will do that with this tragedy as well sometime in the future. But here's why we can never forget. Here's why we cannot afford to forget. And here's why we have to hold on to those memories just a little bit longer. After seeing the great dignity and selflessness of the parents of these 3 martyrs this past week, I noted that the news reports that were coming out after the news on Monday tell us that the parents probably knew very early on that there was a good chance, based on the evidence presented, that their boys were no longer alive. And yet they held it together. The mothers went to the United Nations, they went to the media outlets, because they knew that there was a greater good for the people of Israel that they needed to work for. Where does a mother find the strength to do this? How does a parent, fearing and perhaps deep down even knowing the worst for her child, how does she find the courage to persevere amidst the tragedy? I believe that the answer is that is the definition of being a parent, certainly a Jewish parent. The Talmud tells us that when the wicked Pharaoh of the Passover story decreed that all Jewish baby boys would be thrown into the Nile, Amram, who would become Moses' father, decided that all Jewish families should stop having children, should stop procreating. And so he divorced his wife Yocheved, and he advocated that other men do the same. He simply couldn't cope with the pain of bringing a child into the world, only to see it die shortly after. And yet his daughter Miriam brought him to his senses. She told him, "Father, your decrees are worse than Pharaoh's. You would deny the future generation not only this world, but the spiritual world of Olam Haba as well, by not allowing them to be born." Realizing that she was correct, Amram remarried his wife, and thus was Moshe born, only a few weeks later to be placed in a basket, not knowing whether their child would survive or not. This is the indomitable spirit of life that exists within each and every Jew. The ability to continue having children despite the knowledge that it's a dangerous world out there, a world that has antipathy and resentment for the Jewish people, a violent world where those who hate us will shower rockets on innocence and who don't place the same value upon life. And yet we keep moving forward. We continue to have babies, knowing full well that their future is, God forbid, uncertain. We raise our children with courage. We send them off on the school bus with courage. We let them live their lives with courage. We know that life is fraught with danger. But we also trust in God that all will be as it is meant to be, so that no matter how much time we have on this earth, we live every moment with meaning, specifically because we know how fragile life is, because we know that a life lived and lost is better than no life at all. I believe that this is what gave Naftali, Eyal, and Gilad's parents such courage and dignity in these last several days. And it is because of that great dignity, grace, and courage that they displayed that we have no choice but to honor their wishes. You've probably seen the news reports. The one thing that the Frankels, the Shars, and the Yifrachs have been asking for us continually is to keep up the achdut, the unity and the ahavat Yisrael, and our love for each other. There is nothing less than a revolution that has taken place in Israel over the last few weeks. We have seen secular Jew, religious Jew, Haredi Jew all come together for our boys, praying together, speaking to each other, putting aside our differences and realizing that there is infinitely more that unites us than what divides us. I had the opportunity this past Tuesday to watch the funeral on closed-circuit TV at a rabbinic conference in New York. Afterwards, Rabbi David Stav, who was a candidate for Chief Rabbi of Israel, spoke to our delegation of rabbis. He told us that the change in Israeli society has been dramatic. The unity, the lack of infighting, the reciting of Tehillim from the floor of the Knesset. He told us that he himself had been invited by a nightly TV newsroom to come on the nightly news. Just imagine the CNN of Israel, to come on the nightly news and recite Tehillim as one of the news stories, that they could all recite, the entire crew would be able to recite Psalms together in prayer for the boys. And he said, "What are you talking about?" He said, you're not religious. And they said, "Rabbi, don't worry, we'll put on kippot, our women will dress modestly, and we'll pray together." Yes, it's true. The more time that elapses, the more we will forget. And the more we will relapse into our argumentative selves, the stiff-necked people that we are. We are already beginning to see the fissures forming, the infighting, the different reactions, both appropriate and appalling, that are taking place. But I say to you all here in this room, and to all my brothers and sisters, all of this is but background chatter to the voice that thunders before me. I cannot but hear the resounding plea of 3 mourning mothers and fathers to ensure that their sons' deaths will not have been in vain. I cannot see but the smiling faces of 3 boys who died so that we could come together as one people. And therefore I accept upon myself, and I call upon you all to do the same, to fulfill the mitzvah of the Ahavta